The cold wind cut through the streets like broken glass the night she realized she had been abandoned. Snow drifted softly outside the cafe windows, but inside, everything felt unbearably still. Her fingers trembled around the untouched paper cup of coffee as she stared at the message glowing on her phone screen. "Sorry, can't make it." Something better came up. 6 simple words. 6 words that shattered what little hope she had left. Around her, Christmas laughter echoed through the warm cafe, couples leaned close under golden fairy lights, families smiled over hot chocolate, and holiday music floated gently through the air. Yet for her, the world had gone silent. She sat frozen at that little corner table, dressed in the dark green sweater she had carefully chosen after standing in front of the mirror for nearly an hour, convincing herself that maybe tonight would be different. Maybe tonight she wouldn't go home feeling invisible. But here she was, alone again, the humiliation burning hotter than the coffee she couldn't bring herself to drink. If you believe every story hides a lesson waiting to be discovered, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Stories. Sometimes the smallest act of support helps these stories reach the people who need them most. She lowered her eyes, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. At 28, she had become far too familiar with disappointment. Life had a cruel way of piling heartbreak upon heartbreak until you stopped expecting anything else. 3 years earlier, she had lost her mother to illness after months spent watching the strongest person she knew slowly fade away. Then came the relationship she thought would save her, only to end with betrayal she never saw coming. Since then, Christmas had become less of a celebration and more of a reminder of everything she'd lost. This blind date had been her sister's desperate attempt to pull her out of the loneliness she'd buried herself in. Just one dinner, her sister had begged. You never know. But now, sitting there under the soft glow of Christmas decorations while people around her laughed and celebrated, she knew exactly what she should have expected. She was gathering the courage to stand up and leave when someone stopped beside her table. She noticed polished black shoes first, then the faint scent of winter cologne and peppermint. Looking up, she saw a man standing there, tall and broad-shouldered, his navy coat dusted with melting snowflakes. His dark hair was neatly combed, but there was something tired in his eyes, the kind of exhaustion life carves into people who have carried too much for too long. Beside him stood a little girl, no older than 7, bundled in a cream-colored coat with a red scarf wrapped around her neck. Her blonde ponytail bounced as she shifted nervously, clutching a stuffed reindeer to her chest. The man hesitated, glancing at the empty chair across from her. His expression carried an awkward uncertainty, as though he was about to ask something absurdly inappropriate. Yet there was kindness there too, quiet and genuine. He explained that every other table in the cafe was taken, and his daughter was exhausted after their long evening. Would she mind if they sat there for just a little while? She almost said no, not because she was cruel, but because she wanted to be alone with her embarrassment. But something about the little girl's tired eyes made her nod. The man thanked her with visible relief, helping his daughter into the seat beside him. For a few moments, silence settled between them. The girl swung her legs gently beneath the table while the man removed his gloves, his wedding ring noticeably absent though the pale mark around his finger told its own story. The woman stared into her coffee, hoping they wouldn't notice the redness in her eyes. But children notice everything. The little girl tilted her head and looked at her with heartbreaking sincerity. She asked if she was sad because someone had hurt her. The question landed with such unexpected softness that the woman almost laughed through her pain. She managed a small nod. The girl frowned deeply, then reached across the table and placed her tiny hand over the woman's trembling fingers. It was such a small gesture, innocent and instinctive, yet it shattered the wall she'd been trying so hard to hold together. Tears slipped free before she could stop them. The man looked startled, clearly embarrassed by his daughter's bluntness, but before he could apologize, the little girl spoke again. She said her mommy used to cry at Christmas too, before she went to heaven. And every time she cried, her daddy would do something silly to make her smile. The cafe seemed to pause around them. The man's face changed instantly, grief flickering across it like an old wound reopening. He looked down at his daughter with a mixture of love and sadness so profound it felt almost sacred to witness. He explained quietly that his wife had passed away 2 years earlier in a car accident just days before Christmas. Since then, he and his daughter had made it a tradition to spend Christmas Eve doing random acts of kindness, because his wife had believed no one should ever feel alone during the holidays. The woman felt her chest tighten. Then came the unthinkable. Without another word, the man stood up and walked toward the small stage near the cafe's fireplace where a local musician had been softly playing Christmas songs. He spoke briefly to the performer, who smiled and stepped aside. A hush fell over the room as the man sat at the piano bench. At first, she thought he was simply going to play, but then his fingers touched the keys, and a melody drifted into the cafe so hauntingly beautiful it seemed to stop time itself. It was tender and aching, filled with longing and memory, each note carrying the weight of something deeply personal. The little girl beamed proudly, whispering that it was the song her daddy had written for her mommy when they first met. As he played, his eyes found hers across the room. There was no pity in his gaze. No awkward sympathy, only understanding, the kind that passes silently between two people who know what it means to lose something they can never replace. And then, halfway through the song, the little girl tugged at the woman's sleeve and pulled her gently toward the empty space beside the piano. The child handed her a single folded piece of paper. Confused, she opened it. Written in careful handwriting were the words, "No one deserves to be alone on Christmas. Especially someone who still has so much light left to give." Her breath caught. The man finished the final note, stood, and crossed the room. Then, in front of an entire cafe filled with strangers, he did something she never could have imagined. He asked her to dance. Not because it was romantic. Not because he was trying to impress her. But because he saw someone drowning quietly in loneliness and chose, in that moment, to reach for her. The cafe lights blurred through her tears as she let him guide her into the center of the room. Around them, strangers smiled softly. Some wiped away tears of their own. The little girl clapped happily from her seat. And as they swayed beneath the glow of Christmas lights while snow fell gently beyond the windows, something inside her began to loosen. Not all at once, not enough to erase the years of grief she carried, but enough to remind her that broken hearts can still feel warmth. Enough to remind her that sometimes healing arrives not with grand miracles, but with quiet acts of unexpected kindness. Before we reach the ending, comment below with one word that describes how this moment made you feel. When the song ended, neither of them rushed to step away. They simply stood there, two strangers bound for a fleeting moment by shared pain and fragile hope. Outside, the world remained cold and dark, but inside that cafe, beneath the golden wreaths and twinkling lights, something had shifted. Weeks later, they would meet again. And again after that, not because they were searching for rescue, but because sometimes the people who understand our loneliness best are the ones who have survived their own. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can arrive when we least expect it, take a moment to like, share, and let your voice be heard below. Stories like this matter because they remind us we are never as alone as we think. That Christmas Eve, she had walked into the cafe expecting another reminder that life could be cruel. Instead, she walked out beneath softly falling snow with a little girl holding one hand, a quiet man walking beside her, and the impossible, fragile feeling that maybe, just maybe, some endings are really beginnings in disguise.